My name is Lucia and I am 31 years old. I work as a mid-level manager at a marketing firm in Seattle. Last week, I received a message from my sister after 12 years of complete silence from my family. My emotions are all over the place. Shock, pain, curiosity. They want to reconnect, but there is a catch. They want me to apologize for leaving them behind, as if I was the one who cut them off. If you are watching this from somewhere where family has treated you unfairly, please hit that like and subscribe button. We have a lot to talk about today. Growing up in our small house in Montana was anything but easy. We were a family of 5, though it rarely felt like we functioned as one unit. My father Andrew struggled with alcoholism for as long as I can remember. Most evenings he would come home from his construction job, grab a beer from the fridge, and retreat to the basement to watch TV alone until he passed out on the couch. My mother, Diane, battled severe depression that left her emotionally unavailable most days. She would go through the motions of cooking and cleaning, but her mind always seemed somewhere else, her eyes vacant as she moved through our home like a ghost. I was the oldest of 3 children. My sister Sarah was 8 years younger than me, and my brother Michael came 2 years after her, making him 10 years my junior. With 2 parents who were physically present but emotionally absent, I stepped into the role of a second mother when I was just 11 years old. Every morning, I would wake up my siblings, help them dress, and make sure they had breakfast before school. In the evenings, I would assist them with homework, prepare dinner when Mom was having one of her bad days, and tuck them into bed with stories I would make up on the spot. I can still remember the way Sarah would curl against my side as I read to her, her small hand clutching my pajama top. Michael was more independent but still needed guidance, especially with school projects and nightmares that would wake him screaming in the middle of the night. My relationship with Sarah was especially close. Being the only other girl in the house besides our mother, she looked to me for things Mom never provided. I taught her how to braid her hair, how to draw simple animals on paper, and how to deal with the girls at school who were mean to her. We had a Sunday tradition where we would walk to the small park 2 blocks from our house and spend hours on the swings talking about everything and nothing. While I loved my siblings, fiercely taking care of them came at a cost. My grades began to slip in school as I had less time for homework and studying. I missed out on after-school activities and hanging out with friends because I needed to rush home to make sure Sarah and Michael were okay. I watched as my classmates joined sports teams, went to parties, and formed close friendships, while I stood on the sidelines too busy with family responsibilities to participate. The only adult who seemed to notice my struggle was my grandmother Martha, my mother's mom. She lived about an hour away, but would visit every couple of weeks, bringing groceries and spending time with all of us. During these visits, she would often pull me aside and ask how I was really doing, her kind eyes seeing through my brave face. "You are carrying too much on your young shoulders, Lucia," she would tell me, her weathered hands squeezing mine. "You deserve a childhood too." Those quiet moments with Grandma Martha were the only times I felt seen as a person, rather than just a caretaker. She would bring me books and encourage me to take at least an hour each day for myself, even offering to speak to my parents about their reliance on me. I always declined, afraid that any intervention would make things worse. Despite the challenges, I managed to maintain decent enough grades to keep college a possibility. Late at night, after everyone was asleep, I would research universities far from Montana. The brochures and websites showing smiling students walking across green campuses represented freedom to me. Freedom from responsibility, from the weight of being everyone's rock, from the suffocating feeling that I would never get to discover who I really was beyond my role as a second mother. But even as I dreamed of escape, guilt would follow. Who would make sure Sarah remembered her inhaler during asthma season? Who would help Michael with his multiplication tables? Who would notice when Mom hadn't gotten out of bed for days and make sure dinner was on the table? The love I felt for my siblings was real and deep. On good days, when Sarah would draw me pictures or Michael would proudly show me a good grade on a test, I felt a sense of pride that temporarily overshadowed my exhaustion. We would have impromptu dance parties in the living room when Dad was working late and Mom was having a good day. Those rare moments of joy kept me going through years of premature responsibility. But as high school progressed, the weight became heavier. I watched my friends apply to colleges, make plans for their futures, and live the teenage lives I could only imagine. The resentment I tried so hard to suppress began to bubble up more frequently. especially on nights when Dad would come home drunk and start arguments that would send Sarah and Michael running to my room for comfort. As my senior year approached, I knew I had a decision to make. Would I sacrifice my own future to continue being the family caretaker, or would I find the courage to choose myself for once? The answer came in the form of a full scholarship to Seattle University, 3 states away from home. What happened next would change everything, setting in motion a family estrangement I never could have imagined. The letter from Seattle University arrived on a Tuesday in March of my senior year. I had applied to several schools but had pinned my hopes on this particular one for its strong business program and, if I am being honest, its distance from Montana. When I opened the envelope and saw not only an acceptance but also a full scholarship offer, I felt something I had rarely experienced: pure, uncomplicated joy. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine a life where my primary responsibility was just being a student. No meals to cook, no siblings to supervise, no emotional minefields to navigate between my parents. Just classes to attend, books to read, and people my age to befriend. That fantasy lasted exactly 3 hours until my mother came home from her part-time job at the local pharmacy. I showed her the letter, a small part of me hoping for congratulations or pride. Instead, her face fell as she read the details. Seattle. "That is across the country, Lucia," she said, handing the letter back as if it were contaminated. "You know we need you here." That evening, I tried to explain to both my parents over dinner how important this opportunity was for me. Sarah and Michael sat silently at the table, pushing food around their plates as the conversation grew increasingly tense. "Who is going to take care of things around here if you leave?" my father demanded, his voice rising with each word. "Your mother works, I work. The kids need supervision. This family needs you." "I am 18 years old," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to start my own life. This is a full scholarship. I would be crazy not to take it." My mother began to cry, quiet tears streaming down her face. "We have always been there for you, Lucia. We gave you everything. And now, when we need you most, you want to abandon your family." The irony of her statement was not lost on me. When had they ever truly been there for me? When had they given me anything beyond basic necessities and a mountain of responsibility that no child should bear? But I swallowed those bitter thoughts, knowing they would only escalate the situation. "I am not abandoning anyone," I insisted. "I will call every week, come home for holidays, send money when I can. But I need to do this for myself." The argument continued well into the night, with threats and guilt trips escalating. My father suggested cutting me off completely if I chose to leave. My mother alternated between silent tears and accusations of selfishness. Through it all, I could see Sarah and Michael watching with frightened eyes from the hallway, unsure of what was happening to their family. Later that night, my grandmother Martha called. Someone had obviously filled her in on the situation, and her advice was clear. "Go to Seattle, Lucia," she told me firmly. "Your parents are adults who need to solve their own problems. You have done enough. Do not sacrifice your whole life for mistakes that are not yours to fix." The 2 weeks that followed were excruciating. My parents barely spoke to me, creating an atmosphere so tense that even Sarah and Michael kept their distance. I tried to explain to my siblings that I was not abandoning them, that I would always be their big sister. But the fear in their eyes told me they had absorbed our parents' narrative that my leaving was a betrayal. The night before I was set to drive to Seattle, Sarah crept into my room after everyone had gone to bed. At 10 years old, she seemed both childlike and oddly mature as she sat on the edge of my partially packed suitcase. "Are you really leaving tomorrow?" she asked, her voice small. "Yes, but I am not leaving you." I tried to explain, sitting beside her. "I will call all the time, and you can visit me in Seattle someday. It is supposed to be really beautiful there." Sarah nodded, though I could tell she didn't fully understand. From her pocket, she pulled out a small beaded bracelet she had made in art class. Blue and green beads were strung on elastic thread with a single silver heart charm in the center. "I made this for you," she said, slipping it onto my wrist. "So you don't forget us." I pulled her into a tight hug, fighting back tears. "I could never forget you, Sarah. Never." The next morning was a blur of last-minute packing and awkward goodbyes. My mother refused to come out of her bedroom. My father stood stiffly by the door, giving me a brief, reluctant hug before turning away. Sarah and Michael clung to me until the last possible moment, extracting promises that I would call, write, and visit. "I will call as soon as I get settled in my dorm," I promised as I loaded the last box into my second-hand Honda. "And I will be back for Thanksgiving. It is only a few months away." As I drove away from the only home I had ever known, watching my siblings wave until they disappeared in my rearview mirror, I had no idea that this would be the last time I would see or speak to my family for 12 years. I had no way of knowing that my decision to pursue education would be met with a complete excommunication from the people I loved most in the world. My first week at Seattle University was a whirlwind of orientation activities, meeting my roommate, and finding my way around campus. Between unpacking and attending welcome events, I tried calling home every evening. Each time the phone would ring until it went to voicemail. I left cheerful messages describing my dorm room, my classes, and asking how everyone was doing. "Hey, it is Lucia. Just wanted to check in and see how everyone is. My roommate seems really nice. Her name is Jessica and she is from California. Call me back when you can. Love you all." By the third day of unanswered calls, worry began to gnaw at me. I sent text messages to both my parents, then to Sarah's little flip phone that she had recently gotten for emergencies. No responses came. As my first weekend away from home approached, I wrote a long email to my mother, thinking perhaps she was too busy to talk on the phone. I attached photos of my dorm and the beautiful Seattle campus, trying to share my new experience with them. The email bounced back with an error message: "Recipient has blocked this address." Panic rising in my chest, I tried to find my family on social media. My mother rarely used her Facebook account, but when I searched for it, I discovered I had been blocked. Same with my father's account. Even Sarah's Instagram profile, which I had helped her set up just months earlier, showed the same blocking message. In desperation, I called my grandmother, Martha. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight with what sounded like discomfort. "Lucia, honey, I was hoping you would call." "Grandma, what's going on? No one is answering my calls, and I think they have all blocked me online." There was a long pause before she replied. "Your parents have forbidden anyone in the family from speaking to you. They told everyone you abandoned the family and didn't want contact." The shock of her words hit me like a physical blow. "That's not true. I tried calling every day since I got here." "I know, sweetheart. I told them they were making a terrible mistake, but Andrew and Diane have made up their minds. They are even angry that I am talking to you now." "What about Sarah and Michael? They can't possibly think I abandoned them." Martha's voice cracked slightly. "They are young and confused. Your parents have told them you chose to cut them off, that you don't want to be part of the family anymore." 2 months into my first semester, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I skipped Friday classes, borrowed money from Jessica for gas, and drove 14 hours straight back to Montana. I arrived at our house Saturday afternoon exhausted, but determined to fix whatever had broken. I rang the doorbell, heart pounding in my chest. Through the front window, I could see movement inside. Sarah walked past, then stopped abruptly when she saw me. Her face lit up momentarily before our father appeared, spotted me on the porch, and quickly pulled her away from the window. No matter how long I knocked or how many times I called their names, no one came to the door. I sat on the front steps for nearly 3 hours before finally accepting that they weren't going to acknowledge me. As I walked back to my car, I saw Sarah's face in her bedroom window. She pressed her hand against the glass, her expression a mixture of confusion and sadness. Before I could wave or call to her, she was pulled away again, the curtain falling back into place. That pattern continued for the next 3 years. Birthday cards and Christmas gifts sent back unopened. Voicemails that went unreturned. Letters explaining my side of things returned with "return to sender" stamped across them. Each rejection felt like a fresh wound, reopening the pain just when I thought I might be starting to heal. During my sophomore year, my grandmother Martha passed away suddenly from a heart attack. I found out through a distant cousin who sent me a Facebook message knowing I would want to attend the funeral. When I arrived at the small church in our hometown, my father was waiting outside. Without a word, he blocked my path to the door. "You are not welcome here," he said coldly. "The family is grieving. We don't need you making this about yourself." I stood there in shock, unable to process that I was being denied the chance to say goodbye to the one family member who had supported me. Through the church window, I could see Sarah and Michael sitting in a pew, both noticeably taller than when I had last seen them. Neither looked in my direction. The loss of my grandmother, combined with being refused entry to her funeral, sent me into a tailspin. For weeks afterward, I could barely attend classes, overwhelmed by grief and rejection. The counseling center at the university became my lifeline, providing weekly therapy sessions where I could process the ongoing trauma of being excommunicated by my own family. Why would they do this? I asked my therapist, Dr. Winters, during one particularly difficult session. I didn't abandon them. I just went to college like millions of other people do. Sometimes, Lucia, when people rely on someone too much, they experience that person's independence as a betrayal, she explained gently. Your parents created a dynamic where you were taking on their responsibilities. When you removed that support, it forced them to face their own failings. That made logical sense, but it did nothing to ease the ache in my chest when holidays came around, or when I achieved something and had no family to share it with. The guilt was crushing at times. Had I made the wrong choice? Should I have stayed and taken care of everyone at the cost of my own future? After 3 years of continuous attempts to reconnect, I finally made the painful decision to respect my family's choice. If they had decided I was no longer part of their lives, continuing to push my way back in was only causing more pain for everyone, especially me. I put the returned letters, unworn friendship bracelet from Sarah, and family photos in a box, tucked it away in my closet, and tried to move forward with the life I had chosen. I couldn't have known then that it would be another 9 years before I would hear from any of them again. 9 more years of birthdays, holidays, graduations, and life milestones celebrated without the people I had grown up with. 9 years of building a new life while carrying the invisible weight of an entire family's rejection. After accepting that my family had permanently cut me out of their lives, I threw myself into creating a new identity separate from my role as the family caretaker. My first step was changing my major from accounting, which I had chosen because it seemed practical, to creative marketing, which genuinely excited me. The process wasn't easy. For years, my entire sense of self had been wrapped up in taking care of others. Without that responsibility, I sometimes felt adrift, unsure of who I was or what I wanted. Simple questions like what food I enjoyed or what music I liked listening to were surprisingly difficult to answer when I had spent so long prioritizing everyone else's preferences. Jessica, my freshman roommate, became an unexpected anchor during this time of rediscovery. Unlike the temporary friendships I had managed in high school, our connection deepened into a sisterhood that filled some of the void my family had left. We moved into an off-campus apartment our junior year and remained roommates until graduation. You need to figure out who Lucia is when she isn't being a surrogate mom, Jessica would tell me as she dragged me to concerts, art exhibitions, and weekend road trips along the Pacific coast. The world is bigger than that house in Montana. Through Jessica, I met other friends who gradually formed what I came to think of as my chosen family. We celebrated holidays together, supported each other through finals, and created new traditions that had nothing to do with my past. For the first time, I experienced relationships that weren't based on obligation or responsibility, but on genuine connection and mutual care. Therapy with Dr. Winters continued throughout college and beyond. Those weekly sessions became sacred spaces where I could express the complicated grief of losing my family while they were still alive. You didn't abandon them, Lucia, Dr. Winters would remind me whenever the guilt became overwhelming. You chose a healthy path for yourself, which is something every young adult has the right to do. Gradually, I learned to separate facts from the narrative my family had created. Fact, I had gone to college. Fact, I had tried to maintain contact. Fact, they had chosen to cut me off completely. Understanding these truths helped me begin the slow process of forgiving myself for a crime I hadn't committed. During my senior year of college, I met Thomas at a campus marketing event. He was working for a local agency that was recruiting graduates, and we bonded over our shared love of creative campaigns that told meaningful stories. Our relationship developed slowly, built on friendship first, then deepening into something more. What made Thomas different from the few men I had dated previously was his patience as I navigated my trust issues. When I finally told him the full story of my family estrangement, he didn't offer empty platitudes or try to fix the situation. Instead, he simply listened, held my hand, and assured me that my worth wasn't diminished by their rejection. Families are supposed to support each other's growth, not punish it, he said after hearing about my last attempt to attend my grandmother's funeral. You deserved better, Lucia. After graduation, I accepted an entry-level position at the marketing firm where Thomas worked. Starting in the creative department, I discovered a natural talent for understanding client needs and translating them into compelling campaigns. Work became another form of healing, a place where my contributions were valued and my growth was encouraged. Over the next 7 years, I climbed from junior copywriter to account manager to my current position as mid-level marketing manager. Each promotion felt like a vindication of my choice to pursue education, a tangible proof that I had made the right decision for myself all those years ago. With my first significant bonus, I made a down payment on a small one-bedroom condo in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood. The day I received my keys, I stood alone in the empty living room, overwhelmed by what this space represented. This wasn't just an apartment, it was tangible proof that I had built a life for myself. A life that was mine alone, not defined by caring for others or meeting their expectations. That night, I unpacked the box of family mementos I had kept all these years. Sarah's beaded bracelet, now faded and stretched, still held the small silver heart charm. I placed it in a small dish on my nightstand, a bittersweet reminder of the love that had existed alongside the dysfunction. Despite the fulfilling career, supportive friendships, and growing sense of self, there were still nights when I would lie awake wondering about my siblings. Had Sarah gone to college? Was Michael still interested in science the way he had been as a child? Did they ever ask about me, or had they fully accepted their parents' version of events? On particularly difficult days like the anniversary of my departure or family holidays, I would find myself searching their names online, looking for any glimpse into their lives. Sarah had no public social media profiles I could find. Michael had a LinkedIn account that showed he was studying engineering at Montana State, but his profile picture was too professional and distant to give me any real sense of the person he had become. 12 years after leaving home, I had created a life I was proud of. I had good friends, a partner who understood me, a career I enjoyed, and a home that was truly mine. The pain of family rejection had dulled from a sharp, constant ache to an occasional throb that would surface unexpectedly, then recede again. I had come to accept that some wounds never fully heal. You just learn to live with the scars. Then on an ordinary Tuesday morning last week, everything changed with a single notification on my phone. A Facebook message from an account I didn't recognize with a name that stopped my heart. Sarah Reynolds. Hi Lucia, it's Sarah, your sister. We miss you. Can we talk? 12 simple words that would reopen every question, every wound, and every unresolved feeling I thought I had finally put to rest. The notification appeared while I was in an early morning meeting with clients. I glimpsed Sarah's name on my phone screen and nearly dropped my coffee mug. For the next 2 hours, I struggled to focus on the presentation, my mind racing with possibilities. Was it really her? Why now, after 12 years of silence? What could she possibly want to say? As soon as the meeting ended, I locked myself in my office and opened the message with trembling hands. The profile picture showed a young woman with familiar eyes, though the rest of her features had matured beyond recognition. The Sarah I remembered was a child of 10. This was a woman of 22. Hi Lucia, it's Sarah, your sister. We miss you. Can we talk? The simplicity of the message belied the complexity of emotions it triggered. Joy that she had reached out. Anger that it had taken 12 years. Hope that we might reconnect. Fear of being hurt again. Curiosity about what had prompted this sudden contact. I stared at my phone for nearly 20 minutes, typing and deleting responses. Should I be cautious or open demand explanations, or simply express happiness at hearing from her? Eventually, I settled on something simple. Sarah, I'm so glad to hear from you. I've missed you all these years. Yes, we can talk. When would be a good time? Her response came almost immediately, suggesting a video call that evening. I agreed, then spent the rest of the day in a haze, barely able to concentrate on work. I called Thomas and Jessica, both of whom responded with cautious optimism tinged with protective concern. Just be careful, Jessica warned. I don't want to see you devastated again if this doesn't go well. At precisely 7 o'clock that evening, my laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Taking a deep breath, I accepted, and suddenly there she was. Sarah, my little sister, now a young adult with our mother's cheekbones and our father's serious expression. For a moment, neither of us spoke, taking in the changes that 12 years had wrought. Lucia, she finally said, her voice deeper than I remembered, but with the same soft quality. You look exactly the same, just more grown up. You don't, I replied, emotion making my voice unsteady. You were a little girl last time I saw you. Now you're a woman. The awkwardness of that initial exchange quickly gave way to tears on both sides. Sarah apologized for the years of silence, explaining that she had been told a very different story about my departure. Mom and Dad told us you wanted nothing to do with the family anymore, she said, wiping her eyes. They said you changed your phone number, blocked everyone on social media, and told them not to contact you. The revelation, though not entirely surprising after my conversation with Grandma Martha years ago, still felt like a punch to the stomach. Sarah, that's completely untrue. I called every day after I left. I sent letters, presents, emails. Everything came back or went unanswered. I even drove back to the house after 2 months, but no one would open the door. Sarah's face crumpled. They told us you never tried to contact us, that you were too busy with your new life to care about us anymore. As we talked, a second face appeared in the frame. Michael, now 21, had apparently been listening from off camera. Seeing my little brother as a young man was another shock, his childhood features now sharpened into a more masculine version of the boy I remembered. We found out they were lying about a year ago, Michael explained, his voice surprisingly deep. Dad's been sober for 3 years now, and Mom's finally getting treatment for her depression. Things started changing at home, and we began asking questions about what really happened with you. Over the next 2 hours, we pieced together the events of the past 12 years from both sides. I learned that our father had finally hit rock bottom after losing his job due to drinking, leading to rehab and AA. Our mother had been diagnosed with clinical depression and started medication and therapy. Sarah had graduated high school and was working as a veterinary assistant. Michael was in his 3rd year of engineering school. Then came the revelation that changed everything. Dad and Mom want to see you, Sarah said cautiously. They want to reconnect as a family. Hope fluttered in my chest. Really? They're ready to talk about what happened. Sarah and Michael exchanged an uncomfortable glance. There's something else you should know, Michael said. They're still convinced you abandoned us. They want to reconcile, but they expect you to apologize for leaving. Apologize, I repeated, stunned by the request. For going to college, for trying to build a life when they were the ones who cut me off completely. They believe you chose to leave when the family needed you, Sarah explained, looking uncomfortable. Dad says you knew Mom wasn't well and that they relied on you to help with us. He thinks you put yourself first at the expense of everyone else. The absurdity of their expectation left me speechless. After all the years of rejection, after fabricating a complete lie about my attempts to stay in touch, they wanted me to apologize to them. We know it's not fair, Michael added quickly. But we've just found you again and we don't want to lose this connection. Couldn't you just say sorry to smooth things over? Then we could all move forward. The call ended with Sarah pleading. Please think about it, Lucia. Just a simple apology and we could be a family again. Isn't that worth swallowing your pride? As I closed my laptop, I was overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. The joy of reconnecting with my siblings was overshadowed by the shocking realization that my parents still refused to acknowledge their role in our estrangement. They had lied to Sarah and Michael for years, cut me off completely, and now expected me to take responsibility for their actions. The question haunting me was whether I could bring myself to apologize for something I hadn't done, just to have a relationship with my family again. Would pretending to accept blame be worth the chance to know my siblings as adults? Or would it be the beginning of falling back into the same unhealthy dynamics that had defined our family before I left? I spent that night staring at the ceiling. Sarah's bracelet clutched in my hand, wondering what price I was willing to pay for reconciliation. The week following Sarah's call was one of the most emotionally turbulent of my life. I cycled through every possible feeling sometimes within the span of a single hour. Anger at my parents for maintaining their false narrative. Joy at reconnecting with my siblings. Fear of being hurt again if I opened myself to reconciliation. Hope that perhaps a real healing was possible. I called in sick to work for 2 days, something I had rarely done in my career, unable to focus on marketing campaigns while my personal life was in such upheaval. Thomas came over with takeout food and sat with me as I processed the impossible choice before me. "I can't believe they want me to apologize," I told him as we sat on my living room floor surrounded by containers of Thai food I had barely touched. "Do they really expect me to say I'm sorry for going to college, for trying to have a normal life?" Thomas considered my question carefully, as he always did. "What would it cost you to give them what they want? Not in terms of pride, but in terms of your healing and self-worth." It was a profound question that I couldn't answer immediately. On the surface, an apology seemed like a small price to pay for family reconciliation. Two simple words: "I'm sorry." But what would those words mean in this context? What truth would I be denying by accepting blame for our estrangement? I scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Winters, who had helped me through the worst years of the estrangement. Though our regular sessions had decreased to monthly check-ins over time, she made room in her schedule when I explained the situation. "Reconciliation built on lies rarely lasts, Lucia," she told me after hearing about Sarah's message and the request for an apology. "It's like building a house on sand. It might look stable from the outside, but the foundation won't hold under pressure." Jessica was more blunt when I met her for coffee the next day. "Absolutely not," she said firmly when I asked if I should consider apologizing. "They abandoned you, lied about you, and now they want you to take the blame. That's emotional manipulation, and you deserve better." My thoughts kept returning to Sarah and Michael. They hadn't chosen the estrangement. They had been children fed a narrative by our parents. Now that they had found me, did I have a responsibility to do whatever it took to maintain that connection, even if it meant compromising my own truth? Night after night, I struggled with nightmares where I was back in my childhood home, once again responsible for everyone's emotional well-being. In these dreams, I would try to leave for class or work, only to find doors disappearing or my feet sinking into the floor. I would wake gasping, the old familiar feeling of being trapped threatening to suffocate me. The Sarah who had reached out was no longer the little girl with the beaded bracelet. She was an adult capable of understanding nuance and complexity. The same was true for Michael. Perhaps the real question wasn't whether I should apologize to my parents, but whether I could be honest with my siblings about my experience without driving them away. By the end of the week, I had reached a decision. I would not apologize for leaving home to pursue education, nor would I pretend that my parents' version of events was true. I would, however, agree to meet with my entire family to share my perspective and listen to theirs. If reconciliation was possible, it would have to be based on truth, not convenient fictions. I spent hours drafting an email to send to Sarah, asking her to share it with our parents and Michael. In it, I explained my decision. "I am overjoyed to be back in contact with you and Michael after all these years. There isn't a day that has gone by when I haven't thought about you both and wondered about your lives. I want very much to rebuild our relationship and get to know the adults you've become. I also want to meet with Mom and Dad. However, I need to be clear that I cannot and will not apologize for going to college or for abandoning the family, because that isn't what happened. What I can do is listen to their perspective, share mine, and see if we can find understanding based on truth rather than blame. I have evidence of my attempts to maintain contact after leaving home: phone records, returned mail, even journal entries documenting my drive back to Montana when no one would open the door. I'm not sharing this to accuse anyone, but to establish that my experience was very different from the story you were told. If Mom and Dad are only willing to reconnect if I take blame for the estrangement, then perhaps we're not ready for reconciliation. But if they're open to honest conversation, even if it's difficult, I am too. I love you all and hope we can find a path forward together." After reading the email a dozen times, I finally hit send, then waited anxiously for a response. It came 3 days later, not from Sarah, but from my mother, her first direct communication to me in 12 years. "We'll meet with you. Seattle Coffee Shop on Pike Street, Saturday at 11 a.m. The brevity and lack of warmth in the message didn't bode well, but it was a start. For the first time in over a decade, I would be face to face with the family that had once defined my entire existence. Whether this meeting would lead to healing or deeper wounds remained to be seen, but at least we would finally have the chance to speak our truths directly to one another. I spent the next 2 days preparing myself emotionally for whatever might happen, determined to stand in my truth while remaining open to genuine reconciliation. If there was even a small chance of rebuilding these broken relationships on a healthier foundation, I owed it to all of us to try. Saturday morning arrived with gloomy Seattle rain that matched my nervous mood. I arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early, choosing a large table in the back corner where we would have some privacy for what promised to be an emotional conversation. Thomas had offered to come with me for moral support, but I decided this first meeting needed to be family only. At exactly 11 o'clock, the door opened and 4 people walked in together. Sarah spotted me first, her face breaking into a hesitant smile as she waved. Beside her was Michael, tall and lanky, looking so much like our father that it momentarily took my breath away. And behind them, appearing older and more subdued than I remembered, were my parents. Time seemed to slow as they approached my table. 12 years of absence condensed into a few steps across a coffee shop floor. I stood unsure of the appropriate greeting after such a long estrangement. Sarah solved the dilemma by rushing forward and wrapping me in a tight hug that immediately brought tears to my eyes. "I can't believe you're really here," she whispered against my shoulder. Michael joined the hug more awkwardly, his height making him tower over both of us. "You look different in person than on video," he said with a small smile when we separated. My parents hung back, their expressions guarded. My mother looked thinner than I remembered her, once dark hair now streaked with gray. My father's face showed the effects of years of drinking, lined and somewhat puffy, though his eyes were clearer than they had been during my childhood. "Lucia," my mother finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, Dad." I nodded to each of them, not quite ready for the physical contact that had come so naturally with my siblings. "Thank you for coming." We all sat down in uncomfortable silence, falling over the table as we ordered coffees and pastries that would largely go untouched. It was Sarah who finally broke the tension, launching into cheerful updates about her job at the veterinary clinic and her plans to apply to vet school the following year. Michael followed with news about his engineering program and recent internship. I listened hungrily to these details of their lives, trying to fill in the vast gaps of missed time. They asked about my work in marketing, my condo in Fremont, my life in Seattle. For those first 30 minutes, we carefully navigated safe topics, establishing a fragile connection while avoiding the elephant in the room. Eventually, though, the surface conversation exhausted itself, and the real reason for our meeting could no longer be delayed. My father cleared his throat, his hands clasped tightly on the table before him. "Sarah tells us you're unwilling to acknowledge your part in what happened." He began, his tone immediately defensive. "We're here because the kids wanted this meeting, but reconciliation requires acknowledgement of wrongdoing on all sides." I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the commitment I had made to speak my truth calmly and clearly. "I am more than willing to acknowledge my role in our family history. What I won't do is accept blame for an estrangement I didn't choose or create." "You chose to leave when this family needed you," my mother interjected, her voice wavering. "You knew I wasn't well, that your father was struggling. You knew Sarah and Michael relied on you." "I chose to go to college," I corrected gently. "Like millions of 18-year-olds do every year. I didn't choose to cut contact. In fact, I called every day for weeks. I sent letters that were returned unopened. I drove all the way back to Montana to see you, but you wouldn't open the door." My father's face flushed with anger. "That's not how it happened. You left and never looked back." "You changed your number, blocked us online." "No, Dad, that's what you did," I replied, reaching into my bag and removing a folder I had prepared. "I have phone records showing dozens of calls to our home number in those first few months. I have returned mail with return to sender written in your handwriting. I have dated journal entries documenting every attempt I made to stay connected to my family. I placed the folder on the table between us, not as an accusation, but as evidence of a reality that had been denied for too long. Sarah reached for it first, flipping through the pages with a growing expression of distress on her face. Michael looked over her shoulder, his jaw tightening as he saw the concrete evidence contradicting the narrative they had been raised with. I don't understand, Sarah said, looking up at our parents. You always told us Lucia wanted nothing to do with us, that she never called or wrote. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We were trying to protect you from the pain of her rejection. But she didn't reject us, Michael said quietly, holding up a photograph of a Christmas package that had been sent back unopened. The gift tag, clearly visible in the photo, read, "For Michael with love from Lucia." A heavy silence fell over the table as the truth began to settle. I hadn't come to punish my parents or force them to admit wrongdoing, but neither could I allow the false narrative to continue unchallenged, especially now that Sarah and Michael were old enough to understand the complex reality of what had happened. I was angry when you left, my father finally admitted, not looking at me directly. I felt abandoned, and yes, I made the decision to cut contact. At the time, it seemed justified. You had chosen yourself over your family obligations. I was a child with adult responsibilities, I said softly. I needed to build my own life just like you did at my age. Just like Sarah and Michael are doing now. That doesn't mean I didn't love you all. It doesn't mean I wanted to lose my family. My mother began to sob quietly, her thin shoulders shaking. After a while, it had been so long we didn't know how to reach out, how to admit what we'd done. It was easier to maintain the story we'd created. Sarah, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. I need to tell you something, Lucia. Before Grandma Martha died, she told me the truth. She said you had tried to stay in touch, but Mom and Dad wouldn't allow it. I was only 12 then, and I didn't know what to do with that information. I was confused and scared. By the time I was old enough to really understand, it seemed too late to fix things. The revelation that Sarah had known the truth at least partially for years was yet another shock in a morning full of them. But instead of feeling betrayed by her silence, I felt a deep compassion for the confused child she had been caught between conflicting adult narratives. Is that why you reached out now? I asked her gently. She nodded. Michael and I have been talking about it for months. With Dad's sobriety and Mom's treatment, things have been changing at home. It felt like maybe it was finally time to try and put our family back together. My father, who had been staring at the evidence in the folder, finally looked up at me directly. His expression had shifted from defensive anger to something more complex, a mixture of shame and regret that I had never seen on his face before. I was wrong, he said, simply, the words clearly difficult for him. I was wrong to cut you off, wrong to lie about it, wrong to deny your siblings a relationship with their sister. I can't take back those 12 years, Lucia. I don't know if you can ever forgive that. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't acknowledge the years of inappropriate responsibility placed on me as a child, or the emotional manipulation that had preceded my departure for college. But it was an admission of the central wrong that had shaped the last 12 years of all our lives, and it felt like the first step on a very long road to healing. I don't know what forgiveness looks like yet, I answered honestly. But I do know that I want to try and build something new with all of you, something healthier than what we had before. As our meeting extended into a second and third hour, tentative plans began to form. My parents would continue with their respective recovery programs. Sarah, Michael, and I would rebuild our sibling relationship independent of our parents' issues. We would all consider family therapy to address the deeper patterns that had led to such dysfunction. There were no magical resolutions or tearful group hugs like in the movies. The wounds were too deep and the trust too broken for such simple fixes. But as we finally prepared to leave the coffee shop, something had shifted. A door that had been firmly closed for 12 years now stood slightly ajar, allowing for the possibility of connection, understanding, and perhaps, eventually, forgiveness. As Sarah hugged me goodbye, she whispered, I never took off the friendship bracelet you gave me before I left for college. It's on my dresser at home. I kept yours too, I told her, squeezing her tightly. All these years. It was a small thing, these matching bracelets separated by time and distance, yet preserved as tokens of a bond that had never fully broken. But in that moment, it felt like the most important connection in the world, a thin thread of love that had somehow survived years of silence and separation. As I watched my family walk away, I felt neither the vindication of being proven right, nor the simple joy of reconciliation. What I felt was something more nuanced, the bittersweet recognition that families are complicated, healing is messy, and some journeys must be traveled alone before we can truly come back together. The past 12 years had taught me that family is not about obligation or sacrifice at the expense of self. True family supports your growth even when it means letting you go. It respects your boundaries and truth even when those are difficult to accept. It acknowledges hurt rather than denying it, and takes responsibility rather than assigning blame. I didn't know yet if my birth family could become that kind of family. But I did know that whatever happened next, I would never again compromise my own worth and truth to earn anyone's love. That was perhaps the most valuable lesson of our long separation, and one I would carry forward into whatever relationship we managed to rebuild. In the months that followed, we began the slow process of getting to know each other again. There were difficult conversations, painful revelations, and moments of connection that made all the hard work worthwhile. Sarah and Michael became regular visitors to Seattle. My parents and I established cautious but increasingly honest communication. Family therapy helped us understand the dysfunctional patterns we had all participated in and begin to create healthier ways of relating to one another. The road to genuine healing would be long, with setbacks and breakthroughs along the way. But for the first time in 12 years, we were all walking it together, eyes open to both the painful past and the potential future. Family isn't those who love you only when you're serving their needs. It's those who respect who you truly are, even when that means letting you fly away. Sometimes the greatest act of love is setting someone free without punishment or guilt. And sometimes the bravest act of love is opening your heart again after it's been broken by the very people who should have protected it most carefully. Have you ever experienced a similar situation with family members who cut you off unfairly? Or have you had to set boundaries with loved ones who didn't understand your need to build your own life? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their family struggles. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, true family lifts you up. It never holds you down.